everyone. Again, welcome to Run and Practice. Thank you all so much for taking the time to join us here. My name is Adom, and I'll be your host for today. This is our second product walkthrough session of the year, and we're absolutely thrilled to keep the momentum going, and this time with a deep dive into how resource data can support leadership decisions. For those of you new to us, Runn is a real-time resource management platform designed to help businesses manage their people, project schedules, and long-term forecasts all in one place. Just to set the expectations right up front, this isn't a webinar and it isn't a canned demo. This is a live interactive walkthrough where we skip the fluff and keep things super valuable so you can walk away knowing exactly how to leverage our platform and what it can do for your team. With me today are two specialists, or I should say experts at Runn, who spend their days helping teams solve critical ARM challenges. I have Matt Webb, our senior solution consultant, who's all about practical people-first planning and helping teams make better decisions with real data. I have Jenna Ball with us as well, our account executive. Jenna works closely with customers every day to bring clarity and confidence to their forecasting and planning. We'll keep this very conversational, so I remind and encourage everyone to jump in with questions at any time. Please do use the Q&A box that you'll find right at the center or maybe far right of your Zoom screen. Drop in your questions throughout the session. Jenna and Matt will try and answer a few of them as they go through the demo. If there are any unanswered questions, we'll be sure to answer them in the last 5 to 10 minutes. Contact details for Matt and Jenna will also be shared at the end of the session, so please do stick around to the end so we can share that with you. If everyone would also like to explore the Runn platform as you're going through the demo, please feel free to jump back into your trial account. And if you are just new to the Runn world, then we'll also be providing the link to the trial page in the chat. So keep an eye out for that so you can join us in exploring everything we talk about here. Matt and Jenna, if you're ready, let's dive in.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adom. Hello, everyone, and welcome. As Adom mentioned, my name is Jenna. So in this session today, we are going to focus on how leaders use Runn to make more informed and strategic resourcing decisions. And to shed a bit of light on more of the motivation for this session, I think is a little bit helpful. And so when Matt and I speak with organizations, every day, every week, we find that so many are still relying on spreadsheets, a jack of all trades tool, or a gut feeling to help make resourcing decisions. We hear of project leads and managers spending significant time and too much time purely pulling together multiple versions of outdated files just to create reports for leadership. And the challenge is that by the time that those reports are ready, the data a lot of times is already stale and out of date, which means it probably doesn't likely get used in the way that's intended to, or it is just there to further validate the decisions that have already been made. And we see this reflected in the stat that we've pulled up here from our 2026 State of Resource Management survey, in which about half of respondents either somewhat trust their data, 43%, or don't trust their data at all. Luckily, this is a smaller number at 3%. And this really shows that there's a disparity between the intent of using data to really support a lot of those resourcing decisions and to make more data-informed decisions. But it seems that the trust and quality isn't really fully there across the board, is kind of what we're seeing here. So instead of enabling better data-informed decisions, this fragmented process I described really creates friction, delays, and risk across the organization. And this is where Runn comes in. Runn replaces this fragmented process with a single real-time source of truth for resourcing. This gives leaders instant visibility and greater confidence in their data as well, and without a lot of the manual effort and report wrangling that comes along with it. So the data can actually be used to influence and help shape decisions. And while we recognize there's many different stakeholders who benefit from gaining real-time insights, today we're going to focus on how executive stakeholders, specifically CHROs, COOs, and CFOs, use Runn to access these insights to make better decisions. So before we jump into the demo, I think it's helpful to frame how we typically see teams using Runn to support leadership and strategic decisions. And we generally see this play out in two ways. Number one, bringing Runn in as a tool, an interactive tool into meetings. Being able to click through, see stuff in real time is immensely helpful and beneficial. Or providing access to stakeholders or leadership so they can get a hands-on access to the platform and get real-time view of what's going on. The other way we see Runn being used is to export reports or insights to be able to share broadly with a larger group of stakeholders, or to share this information asynchronously. So today we're going to walk through both scenarios so you can kind of see both sides of how Runn can be used in these conversations. I'll be highlighting much of how the CHRO and COO insights can be gleaned from a variety of different ways in Runn, and Matt will cover the CFO perspective. So without further ado, let's get into the demo. So today we're going to start off with Runn's People Planner. Now, for those that are not as familiar with Runn, just to give a brief introduction, the People Planner in Runn, essentially, you could think of as your resourcing hub. This is where I can see all of my resources. I could click in to view more details on them, whether they be full-time employees or contractors, all can be housed here. I can essentially see over time, and we're looking right now at a half-year time frame, so month over month, I get an understanding of where their availability in this lens is looking. Also can view this by different display units, can see this by utilization percentage, and so on. What becomes abundantly clear, and one of the challenges we often hear about, is that it's very hard to understand who is over allocated, who is on the bench. And in this heat map style, it makes it very simple to see that. So for example, seeing where people are over allocated from this dark blue color and red line to where someone is sitting on the bench, that kind of idle capacity there, who is full, and anywhere in between. So it makes it very clear to see this in this view. The other thing to call it with Runn is that, of course, there's so many different people that might be logging in to use it. And so to make sure the information is very focused, there are so many different ways that you can filter, group, sort, or even change around timescales, display units, and so on. So very configurable in terms of the focused type of information that you're seeing. To dig into how this becomes relevant for leaders is if we were to do group summaries. So if I were to group here by default role, what I'm able to do and see is by all of the roles in my organization here, I get a very clear understanding of where there is, more demand than resources we have, where our teams and roles are over allocated, and really getting these quick high-level insights. And from a CHRO perspective, 4 or 5 years ago, it used to be that if you needed, for example, a full stack developer, you go connect with your hiring lead or CHRO and say, hey, I need to hire someone. I feel like we're getting really busy and work's kind of bubbling up, and you'd be able to hire someone. Today, we find that these requests have been challenged. There is now a need to back this up with data. And a lot of times is not accurate or powerful enough data that can be pulled or kind of found within existing spreadsheets and different resources to back that up. And so where Runn becomes really powerful, and we hear this from a lot of the organizations we speak with, is being able to clearly see where demand is bubbling up and where there might need to be that hiring indication moving forward. And being able to kind of see that view. The neat thing too is also, as you find, for example, we need to hire a full stack developer, I can also group by different metrics such as skills. So also being able to surface that for that specific role, which skills are in the most demand. So you could be really strategic with those hiring decisions as well.
Yeah, and just as Jenna's sharing right now, I mean, there's a multitude of ways that resource data in Runn can be analyzed, and then of course surface back up to leadership teams. And I know in my experience for finance teams, one view that's been incredibly helpful for them is to be able to understand the distribution of work, or sometimes even the disparity of work across their contractors and FTE. Reason, of course, being that we all know how much contractors cost us from a rate standpoint, even from an onboarding time standpoint as well. And where possible, we want to be able to ensure that the plates of our FTE are full before justifying the cost of bringing on contractors. And that's the biggest challenge for so many right now is, like Jenna was saying, right? Like teams feel busy. They, put the finger to the wind to signal a hiring need, and they go out, they hire those contractors. It becomes almost very reactive. And then suddenly you've sort of lost touch with how that actually impacts a business. And all of a sudden, you have more workload on your contractors' plates than your FTEs. And this data can all be filtered down, if you wanted to do this for a specific team or role. But again, the purpose of this is to make this information easy and very digestible for your leaders. Now, as mentioned, there are so many different ways to look at that information. And I know one thing that Jen and I find is that it's very common that resource and operation leaders will pull up Runn in a meeting. So they'll literally put it up on the screen, put it up on a projector, and that helps their leadership team gain that real time insight. Some will grab screenshots from the tool, they'll do exports and pull that into a report. But we're finding more and more that because of the ease of use and the way this data is actually being presented, it makes more sense and it's easier for them to just present this within the tool. The best example I can think of that is charting, because effectively what charting gives you is an organizational wide view of your supply and demand, with that pink line that you see representing your effective capacity. And again, the reason that we're finding executive stakeholders prefer this is for its simplicity. They're not overwhelmed by various columns or, everyone's favorite pivot tables. It's very clean. It's very easy to digest this data. And, at the end of the day, it's helping your leaders understand, do we have enough capacity for both current and future demand? And if there is a shortage, what is that gap? And every time I'm in here and taking clients through charts, I think back to a conversation I had, it was probably around this time last year. And it was with a senior director of operations. And they had shared that their main driver for looking at Runn was because their team was overworked and they needed help. And they went to their CFO for additional hires. And the CFO came back and said, prove it. Prove it to me that the 50, 60 engineers that you have today are overbooked. And for them, they saw charts as a way of being able to demonstrate to their finance team, to their CFO, that pain is real. And it almost gave that CFO the validation that they needed to go out and approve those hires.
Mm-hmm. And as you might have noticed, I've been kind of turning on and off this tentative project here. And what's really helpful, and to Matt's point within Runn, is that Runn supports both confirmed as well as tentative projects, or you could think of them as hard or soft bookings or whatever language you'd like to use. But ultimately, it's looking at what projects are in place. They have those resources allocated, but then also what is in the backlog, what is in the sales pipeline, and what would be the impact if that project were to move forward as it's currently planned. And this enables organizations to kind of plan ahead of time, make sure, to Matt's point, that they have the right resources there, so that they can meet that demand as it comes in. And so being able to toggle this off and on, or select individual projects and whatnot as you're going through, is extremely beneficial, and something that this tentative toggle comes up everywhere in Runn. We'll touch on that in a little bit. From a COO perspective. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to mention just a couple of quick things on that. I know one of the questions we often get is, how does Runn work in collaboration with their CRM? And so it's really common, and I think this was a question, it's really common that people will connect Runn to HubSpot, they'll connect it to Salesforce, so that they can bring in those late stage opportunities as tentative projects, as Jenna was showing, and then that helps them measure against that potential demand in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And using the same charts here from a CEO perspective, what's really neat about this is it's kind of able to show the available room, if you look at it this way or in it this way, for new business opportunities. So it is, highlighting that future, increase in capacity as we get into late August and September. They might be a quick conversation to the director of sales or sales lead to push for new clients in this window, because there's, an immense amount of availability that opens up. And we want to make sure that our resources are not just, sitting on the bench being idle, but that we're using our team effectively, throughout the entirety of the year. So being able to have that foresight and look down the road and see, where do we need to win new business, and where is that window where our availability looks up. And I think, ultimately, another big thing to highlight here is that end users and leaders can get this data in real time. They don't have to wait for someone to pull a report. So it's just as simple to log in, kind of take a quick look at the charts or those group summaries as we went through, and to touch on that as well.
And you know what, that actually, it's funny you mentioned that, Jenna, because that takes me back to a webinar that we did last week, and I'm sure some of the folks who are on today might have attended that one. But it was a webinar that we had held on the topic of utilization. And in that session, the guest speakers had spoke about the word joint and its importance of how when you are joined as a leadership team, you're making those decisions across those different stakeholders and across those different departments. So whether it's finance, recruitment, operations, but the only way that that happens is when you have that visibility. And really at the end of the day, like that's the gap, that's the business challenge that we're trying to solve. There's a great question from Amy there, and where she had asked, can you specify a person's location? And it's very useful to have multiple different locations that you need to plan against. Short answer is yes, absolutely, Amy. So it's very common that groups that are using Runn are across different geographic regions, and they need to be able to plan capacity. They need to be able to report on utilization. It could be by region, it could be by office location. Those are simply set up as custom fields. Sometimes they're set up as tags as well. But when you set those up as custom fields, those become attributes that you can apply to that reporting, whether it's within charts or within reporting that we'll be covering there in a moment.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
Jenna, back to you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so this is a couple of the ways that we see Runn being brought into those live conversations. So we'll transition now more to the insights and report side, and how these can help to support the strategic resourcing decisions as well. So in Runn's insights dashboard, insights are really about the big picture, gaining visibility over trends over time, kind of looking back on the past 6 months, looking forward to the next 6 months, however you want to shape it. And within Runn, there are several, preset insights that have different focuses. And you can also, create custom reports. And, as leaders might not all be in Runn, insights is where a lot of times we see clients, use Runn to bring presentation ready visuals like you see here of looking at, capacity over time to their leadership team. And it could be as simple as just sharing this, exporting it, putting it in a slideshow deck, an email or what have you, to be able to share this, with a broader group. And what also makes this valuable for leadership is the ability to build these, custom dashboards. So if there is, one that reports that your leadership team commonly asks about, or leadership wants to have access to Runn itself, very easy to kind of add in individualized insights, filter it, change the time frame, display units, and what have you, to make it really focused on what's most important to that person. And really, it can help to answer questions like, from a CHRO perspective, which roles are we still hiring for? And, is our future demand indicating we might need to hire further? Or for COOs, do we have enough capacity to support our future tentative workload, or even play around with different projects? Or, taking a look at what is the overall utilization picture. Are we seeing that our teams are quite balanced over time, and are we trending in the right way so that we don't have a huge amount of people over allocated or, sitting on the bench as well, and really seeing how that trend progresses over time.
Yeah, and utilization actually is a really good example of this, because we often find that finance leaders don't always have access to that information. And I'm sure for many of you that are on this meeting today, on this webinar, utilization is equating to revenue, equating to efficiency. So even just increasing that utilization by 1 point can mean millions of additional revenue. And so it's super helpful for finance to have that view and to have that insight, and just know, like, is the team on track to hit target? Or what happens if we do, take on that tentative work? Like, what does that mean? How does that increase our utilization? And, the point that we've mentioned a couple of times here is that, it's not always that data doesn't exist. It's just that it's tough to get to, or it lives within spreadsheets, and they don't always have the foresight to actually see what is coming. And that is the purpose, again, of insights, is to give you that high level view. But where you need to actually dig into that data, that lives more within the report center. And that's where you can actually dive into the raw data. And the purpose of reports, the way it's all set up is you have several preset reports that are segmented by focus, but you can also customize those reports. So if you need to structure that report in a particular way, to Amy's point earlier, if you need to see that broken down by office location, that can all be done. Maybe what we'll do is we'll look at a couple examples. I'll put my finance hat back on. Perhaps, Jen, if we look at the financial forecasting report under projects, this is one that is commonly used by finance leaders because it's giving them a summary of those key financial metrics that need to be tracked. So whether that's revenue, whether that's profitability, margins, and in this example, you're seeing it summarized or rather grouped by your confirmed projects and your tentative projects. But the beauty of Runn is, again, being able to structure this and create layers that are specific to how you need to see them. So as an example, instead of looking at this by confirmed versus tentative, if we wanted to stack on, let's say, client as an example there, so that when you see that broken down by client, we'll see that data summarized. And then when you go into each respective status, you'll see that again broken down. And the same goes, I'll just go back to Amy's question again regarding whether it's location, by practice, by division. Runn gives you that flexibility to group and then layer that data in a way that you need to see it.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Matt, for going through that. And also want to be mindful of time here to make sure we have enough time for questions. But just to pull up one more quick report here, just showing the utilization trends by role. And this report can be helpful for kind of many different types of leadership. And if I just kind of figure around the time frame a little bit here. Whether it is historical or forward looking, this utilization report is showing these trends, over time by role. And as Matt mentioned, we can group and kind of sort this in so many different ways. And, ultimately, if I put my CHRO hat on, we can visually see from this heat map, which roles are over or underbooked, which, might indicate some early signals of burnout or idle capacity as well. And so, the beauty of all of this, with reports and insights as well, is having all this information in real time. The team is going through the regular motions of assigning projects. Those risks are being surfaced through the reports and insights without delay, without 2-3 days of kind of wrangling all those reports when you are using spreadsheets or fragmented tools. So where a lot of times you can't identify those issues until it's too late. So having this all in one spot here as well.
Yeah, there's so much more too that we could cover, and happy to dive into any specific areas that people might have interest in. We do want to open it up to some questions. One thing I'll touch on we didn't get a chance to run into is, no pun intended, is being able to report on actuals versus scheduled. So Runn is primarily used for budgeting out your hours, your scheduled hours, what you think people are going to work on. But you can also pull actuals into Runn so that you can run a variance report. I call that one out specifically because I know how important that is to finance teams, because that drives a lot of planning, that drives a lot of trend analysis as well. So we want to open it up to questions. I think at the end of the day, whether we're talking about a CHRO, a CFO, a COO, they all kind of care about different things, but there's often a lot of overlap. And what is important to them is having access to this information and having that single source of truth that allows you to just drive the business forward. And I'm sure for many of you today, you're thinking hey, how do I make it easy for my CXO to digest the information that they need to see that is going to help them make those decisions? And at the end of the day, that's really the goal here with Runn. So we want to know what matters to you, what questions is this sparking? I'm going to open up the Q&A because there's a few questions I saw that came through, and I think there were some in the chat as well. So let me just quickly pull that up. So there's a question here from Irvish about the cost model. So the way the licensing works is that it's priced per resource. So it's priced per active resource. And the best way you can actually think about it is just as Jenna has displayed there, it's the number of active people. So there's no cost if you are archiving resources or if you're doing this on placeholders. The cost is really tied to the number of resources that you're managing within the tool.
Mhm. And there's a bunch of good questions here. To take another one. So can you forecast opportunities for your sales pipeline in Run? So Matt spoke to that a little bit, but essentially we see a lot of organizations that, do use the tentative function for that. Now, whether it be, having that just kind of building up projects that, manually throughout Run, CSV upload or connecting it, with your CRM so that when it reaches, for example, like 70-80% deal stage, it creates a tentative project. We see that in a variety of different ways and a common practice within Run as well.
Good question, actually, from Jennifer here, from Jennifer Modesto. Are there any limitations on connections of data that can be brought in or out of Run? Short answer is no. There are several ways to connect Run to other tools. The most recommended method is always going to be through our API because that gives you the most amount of flexibility. But it's very common that Run will connect to HR tools, to CRMs, to finance tools. But yeah, there's really no limitations on the connection points that you can connect Run to.
I'll take Amy's question here. So her question was, what's the best way to represent time allocation spent on internal activities such as interviews, business development, research, et cetera, versus billable client work? And so within Run, you can have both billable and non-billable projects. You can also allocate time in billable, non-billable. So there's a lot of differentiation that's created there. Sometimes we'll see organizations, approximate that 20% of their resource time is spent towards those types of activities. So they have a project that's simply called business as usual and allocate, 20% of their time, towards that non-billable work as well. So lots of ways to break it up and differentiate it as well. I'll take just the last question and we'll hand it back off to Adam as well. And if there's any other questions that come in, we will also follow up with them afterwards as well to make sure that all of the questions get answered, but we appreciate all the participation. So there was one more question. Oh, there's a couple more questions that came in, but how does access to financials work? Can everyone see it? And so within Run, there are user permissions. So there's kind of 3 different levels of financials access. There's none, so can't see anything. All, so they can see everything, or restricted, which means cannot see costs. So there's lots of different ways to set that up, either at a manager or administrator level within Run as well. But I think we'll hand it back to there and pass it over to Adam for the final wrap up. And thank you so much for all the questions.
Awesome. Thanks, team. And thanks for everyone for joining us today. As promised, we've kind of come to the end of our session. I wanted to share Matt and Jenna's contact details, so you can see that on the screen right now. Drop in any questions you have to sales@runn.io if there was any questions that we didn't get to or we didn't answer, but you felt like you had something that you wanted to ask the team, make sure to use that email. For those of you that are new and haven't started your Runn journey yet, we have included a link in our chat to the Runn trial, and I'll make sure to pop that in again right over here for the team. So thank you all again for joining. We hope to catch you at the next one. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.